Nutrition and whitetails. What can we do to really boost that into our deer to get a healthier deer herd?
I've said it before, you'll hear me say it again, I will continue to say it. Help the deer do what deer want to do.
So before in the Building Whitetail series, we've talked about what can we do. We can do, you know, food plots, some timber management, minerals, supplemental feed, things like that. And those are all great things. If you can supplemental feed, it's a great way to get nutrition into your deer. If you can do that, you can put mineral out, at least I believe in most states. Mineral is a great one. Make sure that you are using one that has the correct ratio from a good company. Make sure you're not just buying salt. Salt's cheap, salt's filler. It might help you get a lot of pictures, but let's try to think of this from a broad spectrum. What is good for your deer? Because what's good for your deer is ultimately what's going to be good for you. So make sure you're running a good mineral. Same with feed as well. Make sure you're running a good quality feed that's got, you know, if you're just running corn, what are you really accomplishing? You know, you can add something to your feed and really add a lot of value for not a whole terrible lot of money. So, you know, just make sure you're doing that for the right reasons. I know checking a card for a lot of pictures is a lot of fun, but let's try to make sure that we're being intentional about where we spend our dollars and keeping the herd where it needs, the health of the herd as a key picture. Food plots, okay? So this is where we're going to kind of dive in. Deer, whitetail deer, mature ones, can eat up to and some over 6 pounds of food a day. That's a lot of food. So if you've got, say on this 80 acres I've got right here that we're sitting in because it's raining outside, I've got probably 8 to 10 deer that are here on this property in any given night, evening, morning, whatever. They don't all bed here. Some days, like when my wife shot her buck this year, we had a tremendous amount of deer. I think we had 23 deer just centralized here in the food plots because we had all the food. So if you've got, you know, and people ask me all the time, how much food do I plant? Well, I would much rather have food left over come spring than food disappear during the winter months when I need it the most, okay? So err on the side of caution and plant more food. I've got, let me think, 1, 2, 3, I've got 4 acres of food plots on this 80 acres, and that is sufficient. But this is kind of where I'm taking this. How can I make more food with less acreage? Because people will talk about, you know, a 1 or 2 acre food plot doesn't do me much good. Where, I mean, I know I've seen them wiped out, but if we can get those food plots to where they are producing the absolute max tonnage or bushels, if it's standing beans or corn, whatever, you know, the grains, how can I get the most bushels possible? Or if it's a fall plot or a clover plot, what's the most tonnage I can produce so that I am feeding these deer as much as I can with as little acreage as possible. And if you've got plenty of acres, maybe that's not an issue. You can plant larger amounts of food. In fact, I think large plots are a great tool. It kind of spreads out your herd pressure, you know, kind of gives deer that don't get along some more room to go about what deer do. So how do we make the food plots better? Well, there's a large misconception right now, and there has been for a while in the hunting community, that lime is just a great thing to put on food plots. Guys, this is money that you're absolutely wasting if you're just throwing it out there for no good reason. You might get lucky and you need some calcium, but pull a soil test, pull a complete soil test. Calcium is really the starting component on a food plot of how to get nutrition into a plant. So what our job here is we're going to build the best plant that we possibly can, because the healthier the plant, the more nutrition that plant can pull. So when a deer eats that plant, it's getting the max amount of nutrition, all the vitamins and minerals that are in the soil, into their body, whether it's does that are lactating, they've had, you know, everything's coming out of winter. Bucks are starting to grow antlers again. Now shed season, you know, they've dropped their antlers for the most part. They're going to be rebuilding. They're still, all winter they're trying to just maintain a weight that they ran off during rut. It can be very hard to rebuild that if you have a harsh winter. Does, they are forming fawns right now. If you haven't looked into fetal programming, do some research on that and how the health of the doe affects the fawn and the development of the fawn. So calcium. If you are at a 70% base saturation calcium, make sure when you run a test, go through a good lab. Go through a lab that's used in the agricultural world, Midwest labs, Ward labs, things of that nature. Find some good reputable labs that do a full breakdown. All the macronutrients, all the micronutrients. N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, zinc, sulfur, manganese, boron, aluminum, and make sure they run the base saturation percents. So if you are at a 70% calcium, base saturation calcium, you don't need lime. And oftentimes you'll have a pH of a different number. You might have a low pH, you might have a high pH, and that is, people think if I have a low pH, I just throw lime out there. Your calcium might be just fine. If you got a 70, 75, high 60s up to 80% base saturation calcium, your food plot has enough calcium. That's what's in lime is calcium. So, if you got a 5.8 pH and a 72% base saturation calcium, I know I'm kind of getting a little deep here, but we've done this series long enough to where guys should, follow along the best you can. Go back, watch the series through again if you need to. We build up to this. If you've got that, you've got another issue in your soil. You might not be draining well. You might have too high salt. This is something where guys just throw things out there, especially in times where fertility is high priced. Make sure you know what you're putting on or what you need before you apply. So we want to make sure that we have adequate levels of fertility in the soil, because high fertility is the thing that builds plants. And high biological activity. You want to make sure that you're feeding your microbes. Cover crops help. There's some things, humic and fulvic acid. There's different things you can apply for soil amendments. Without getting too much into the agricultural side of things, that's kind of lightly touching on that. But make sure that you are boosting soil health, and make sure that you're boosting soil health intentionally. And using things that, cover crops or your spring blends, make sure that they're intentional in regards to helping your soil and freeing up nutrients in the ground for movement into the plants to help feed your deer. Like I said, feed, mineral, healthy food plots. Healthy dirt equates to healthy food plots. Good tonnage. The better your soil is fit for raising a crop. You're going to have, like I said, I know I'm repeating myself, but more greens, more bushels. If you can take 2 acres and take a 30 bushel soybean yield and bump it to 40, 50 bushels, that's a lot of grain. That's a lot of crop out there that you have added at no more acreage cost to feed your deer. So let's make sure we're maximizing the acres that we can, being the most intentional, and using our dollars wisely as things are not getting any cheaper. So that's a brief summary. Supplemental feed, if it's legal, and mineral. Make sure you're using quality feeds. Don't just feed straight corn. That's not achieving anything other than getting pictures. We're focusing on herd health, so make sure you're putting herd health first, because if you're passionate about land management, that should be your number one key. Food, mineral, and quality food plots. Quality food plots starts with the dirt. Make sure you're being very intentional with your soil and not over applying things that you don't need or under applying. Maybe you're applying too much potassium and what you need is zinc, things like that. Make sure you've got a balanced soil. And so that's really the encompassment of this Building Whitetails episode. It's making sure that we are getting all the nutrition into our deer as best as we possibly can and as most efficiently and the most cost effective. So guys, I appreciate it. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode.